The great council chamber stretched out like a metallic ocean filled with creatures from across the galaxy. Floating seats held beings with scales, tentacles, and crystalline bodies that sparkled under the artificial lights. At the center of it all sat the council speaker, a massive creature called Zethkar, whose purple skin rippled when he spoke. Jake Morrison walked slowly down the long path toward the speaking platform. His simple black suit looked plain compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the alien delegates. Some of them barely glanced at him. Others whispered among themselves in languages that sounded like music or grinding metal. Jake had been Earth's ambassador for 12 years. He had sat through thousands of meetings, listened to endless debates about trade routes and territorial disputes, and watched as humanity was treated like a junior partner in galactic affairs. Today would be different. Today would be the last time he stood in this chamber. He reached the speaking platform and placed his hands on the smooth surface. The chamber's translation system hummed to life, ready to carry his words to every species present in their own language. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Jake began, his voice steady and calm. I speak today on behalf of the United Earth Coalition and all human colonies throughout known space. A few delegates looked up from their private conversations. Most continued to ignore him as they had for years. After careful consideration and extensive discussion among our leadership, humanity has reached a decision that will affect our relationship with this body. Jake paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The United Earth Coalition formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant hum of the environmental system seemed to quiet. Zethkar's massive head turned toward Jake, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence. We thank the Council for the opportunities we have shared over the past century, Jake continued. However, our species has chosen to pursue a different path forward. We believe this decision serves the best interests of both humanity and the galactic community. Councillor Vexful from the Crystalline Dominion let out a sound like breaking glass that Jake's translator turned into laughter. Another human emotional outburst, the crystal being said, its voice ringing through the chamber. How typically primitive? Jake didn't react to the insult. He had expected it. All human personnel, including diplomatic staff, trade representatives, and civilian contractors, will depart from council space within the next 72 hours. We ask for safe passage for our vessels and citizens during this transition. Zethkar rose from his floating throne, his purple bulk casting a shadow over Jake. Ambassador Morrison, surely you understand the implications of this rash decision. Humanity cannot survive alone in this galaxy. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your military is laughably small. Your economy depends entirely on council trade agreements. Jake met the alien's gaze without flinching. Speaker Zethkar, we appreciate your concerns, but our decision is final. We have prepared for this moment, and are confident in our ability to chart our own course among the stars. What Jake didn't say was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for 40 years. While the Council saw humans as useful but expendable workers, Earth's brightest minds had been developing technologies that would make them completely independent. Dr. Lisa Chun had overseen the creation of quantum drives that could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. Teams of engineers had perfected matter conversion systems that could turn asteroid rock into any material needed. Most importantly, they had learned to build everything they needed without relying on Council technology or resources. Admiral Trenver of the Hegemony Fleet leaned forward in his seat. His insect-like features clicked as he spoke. The humans maintain critical infrastructure throughout 7 sectors: mining platforms, communication relays, navigation beacons. They cannot simply abandon their responsibilities. All equipment and installations built or maintained by human personnel will be transferred to Council control within the week, Jake replied. We have prepared detailed instruction manuals and training programs for your engineers. What Jake didn't mention was that those manuals only covered the basic functions of the systems. The real innovations, the elegant solutions that kept everything running smoothly, were hidden in human-designed subsystems that the aliens would never understand. Without human maintenance, Those systems would begin failing within months. Trade Minister Cloakter stood up, his metallic body reflecting the chamber lights. The shipping routes through human space carry 60% of our intersector commerce. You cannot simply close them. We have no intention of closing anything, Jake said. However, we will no longer provide security, maintenance, or support services for vessels passing through former human territory. All ships will be free to travel as they choose, but they do so at their own risk. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages while their translators struggled to keep up. Zethkar raised one massive arm and the noise gradually died down. "Ambassador Morrison," the speaker said, his voice carrying a tone of forced patience. "Perhaps humanity needs time to reconsider. We are willing to discuss adjustments to your current agreements. Better trade terms, perhaps, or representation on additional committees?" Jake shook his head. "Our decision is not based on dissatisfaction with our current arrangements. We simply believe that our species will thrive better on an independent path. We harbor no ill will toward the Council or its members." Captain Steve Parker received the coded message aboard his cargo ship Horizon's Edge while docked at Port Nexus Station. The message was simple: package delivered, return home. Within minutes, he was preparing his ship for departure. Throughout the galaxy, similar messages reached every human ship, outpost, and settlement. The evacuation had been planned down to the smallest detail. Emergency supplies had been pre-positioned. Transport ships had been disguised as routine cargo vessels. Safe routes had been mapped through unexplored space. On the mining platform Kepler 7, Foreman Bill Ryan gathered his mixed crew of humans and aliens. "Folks, I just received word that all human personnel are being recalled to Earth effective immediately. The transport ship Mercy will arrive in 6 hours to pick us up." His alien co-workers stared at him in confusion. "But the quarterly production." "Reports are due next week," said one of the Vorthan engineers. "And the new drilling equipment just arrived." Bill handed him a datapad. "Everything you need is in there. Good luck." Similar scenes played out across hundreds of worlds. Human doctors left detailed medical records with their alien colleagues. Human teachers turned over their lesson plans. Human engineers provided backup copies of all their technical manuals. In every case, they were polite, professional, and completely unhelpful when asked to explain why they were leaving. Dr. Karen White sat in her laboratory on Lunar Colony, watching the global communication network as reports flooded in from across human space. The evacuation was proceeding exactly as planned. No incidents, no delays, no second thoughts. Humanity was leaving the galactic community as quietly and efficiently as they had joined it a century earlier back in the council chamber. Jake Morrison prepared to leave the speaking platform. He had delivered his message, answered their questions, and endured their insults with dignity. Now came the hardest part. "Before I go," he said, his voice cutting through the angry murmur of voices, "I want to thank those of you who treated humanity with respect and friendship over the years. We will remember your kindness." He paused and looked directly at Zethkar. "For those who saw us only as useful servants, we hope you find others willing to fill that role. The galaxy is vast, and surely there are species more suited to your expectations than we were." With that, Jake Morrison turned and walked away from the speaking platform. Behind him, the chamber erupted again in angry voices and demands for explanations, but Jake didn't look back. He had a ship to catch and a new future to help build. As Jake's shuttle lifted off from the council station, he watched the massive structure shrink behind him. Soon it would be just another distant star. Humanity was going home, and they were taking their secrets with them. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and the Galactic Council had settled into a comfortable routine of mockery. The great chamber that once echoed with Jake Morrison's final words now buzzed with jokes and laughter at humanity's expense. Chancellor Vexthal of the Crystalline Dominion stood at the center of a group of delegates, his crystal body sparkling as he gestured dramatically. "And then the human engineer told me that their primitive fusion reactor was running at peak efficiency," he said, his voice creating musical notes that the translators turned into laughter. "Peak efficiency! As if their Stone Age technology—" could compare to our quantum cores. The gathered aliens chuckled and clicked their approval. Trade Minister Cloakter, his metallic frame gleaming under the chamber lights, added his own story. The human doctor on Sigma Station actually tried to teach our medical staff about something called bedside manner. Can you imagine emotional attachment to patients? How wonderfully backward. Admiral Trengor's insect-like features clicked in. Amusement. I heard that human pilots were actually proud of their manual flying skills. Manual flying in an age of automated navigation systems? No wonder they were always having accidents. Council Speaker Zethkar watched the scene from his floating throne, his 6 eyes blinking slowly. Part of him enjoyed seeing the delegates in good spirits, but another part wondered if they were being too quick to dismiss the humans entirely. Still, the past 6 months had proven that the galaxy could function perfectly well without them. The shipping lanes are running smoothly, Zethkar announced to the chamber. Trade volumes are up 12% from last quarter. Clearly, removing the human bottleneck has improved our efficiency. What Zethkar didn't know was that Trade Minister Cloakter had been carefully editing the reports he received. In his private office, Cloakter stared at the real numbers on his screen and felt a growing knot in his metallic stomach. The shipping routes through the former human sectors were becoming increasingly problematic. The first signs had been small. A communication relay would go offline for a few hours, causing minor delays. A navigation beacon would broadcast incorrect coordinates, sending ships slightly off course. Mining platforms would experience brief power fluctuations that reduced their output by a few percentage points. Cloakter had assumed these were normal growing pains as the Council's engineers took over human-maintained systems. But the problems were getting worse, not better. His assistant, a nervous Vorthan named Keltron, shuffled into the office carrying a stack of damage reports. Minister, we've lost contact with the cargo vessel Prosperity's Dream. They were carrying medical supplies to the Outer Rim colonies. Equipment failure? Cloakter asked, though he already knew the answer. Navigation system malfunction. The ship's computers show they're following the correct course, but their actual position is completely wrong. They're currently drifting toward an asteroid field. Cloakter rubbed his temples with his metallic fingers. This was the 3rd ship this week to suffer navigation problems in the former human sectors. Send a rescue vessel. And increase the budget for the technical support division. What Cloakter didn't realize was that Commander Bill Ryan was watching. The entire situation unfolded from a cloaked observation post hidden in the shadows of an asteroid. The small human facility had been secretly installed years ago, disguised as a routine mining operation. Now it served as a perfect vantage point to observe the Council's struggles. Bill watched as the rescue ship struggled to locate the lost cargo vessel. The Council's engineers were competent enough, but they didn't understand the subtle modifications humans had made to the navigation systems over the decades. Every beacon, every relay, every computer system contained hidden improvements that the original alien designers had never imagined. Status report, Bill said into his communication device. Dr. Karen White's voice crackled through the encrypted channel from Earth. The quantum communication network is experiencing regular failures. The automated mining platforms are producing 30% less than their rated capacity, and the diplomatic translation protocols are developing strange glitches. Bill smiled grimly. Any word from the Council about requesting our help? Nothing official. But our monitoring stations are picking up increased chatter about technical difficulties. They're starting to notice that things aren't working as well as they used to. Back on the Council station, Engineer Ithran of the Peaceful Traders was having his own crisis. The life support systems in Section C had been acting strangely for weeks. The air recyclers would slow down randomly, causing carbon dioxide levels to spike. The water purification systems would shut down for maintenance cycles that lasted twice as long as they should. Ithran had pulled up the technical manuals that the humans had left behind, but they were frustratingly incomplete. The documents explained how to perform basic maintenance and repair simple problems, but they said nothing about the advanced modifications that clearly existed in the systems. These humans were more clever than we gave them credit for, Ithran muttered as he studied the environmental control schematics. They've integrated their improvements so deeply into our systems that we can't even see where their work begins and ours ends. His assistant, a young crystalline named Zekvil, looked up from her own datapad. Should we contact the human colonies and ask for technical assistance? Ithran considered this. It would mean admitting that the peaceful traders couldn't handle their own technology, which would be embarrassing, but it might be worth it to get the systems working properly again. Let's try that, he said. Open a channel to the nearest human colony. But when Zekvil attempted to establish communication, she found only silence. The human colonies that had been regular trading partners just months ago were no longer responding to any messages. It was as if they had simply vanished. Meanwhile, Captain Amy Foster piloted her stealth ship silent running through the former human shipping lanes. The vessel was invisible to most sensors, allowing her to observe Council activities without being detected. What she saw confirmed what the monitoring stations had been reporting. Council ships were struggling with basic operations. A Vorthan cruiser had been drifting for 2 days after its hyperdrive systems developed a fault that the crew couldn't repair. A crystalline transport was moving at half speed because its navigation computer kept plotting inefficient courses. Through hyperspace, Amy opened a channel to her base. This is silent running reporting. The Council's technical problems are getting worse. I count 17 ships in this sector alone that are operating below normal capacity. Dr. Pete Jackson's voice came through the secure channel. Any signs that they're trying to reverse engineer our modifications? They're trying, but they don't understand the underlying principles. I watched a team of hegemony engineers spend 6 hours trying to repair a power coupling that a human technician could have fixed in 20 minutes. They eventually gave up and installed a replacement part that works at about 60% efficiency. Amy could hear Pete chuckling on the other end of the line. They always assumed we were just good at following instructions. They never realized we were actually improving their designs. The truth was that humans had been quietly upgrading alien technology for decades. When a council system broke down, human engineers didn't just fix it, they made it better. They improved efficiency, reduced maintenance requirements, and added features that the original designers never imagined. But they did it so subtly that the aliens never noticed. Now, with the humans gone, those improvements were failing one by one. The systems were reverting to their original, less efficient designs, or breaking down entirely when the alien engineers tried to repair them incorrectly. Back in the council chamber, the mood was still festive. Chancellor Vexthal was entertaining another group of delegates with stories about human incompetence. They actually believed that their primitive computers could match our quantum processors. Imagine the arrogance. But Trade Minister Cloakter was no longer laughing. He had just received another report about shipping delays, and the numbers were becoming impossible to ignore. Cargo that used to move smoothly through the former human sectors was now taking twice as long to reach its destination. Insurance claims for damaged goods were up 40%. Perhaps, Cloakter said quietly, we should consider that the humans might have been more useful than we thought. Chancellor Vexthal's crystalline body stopped sparkling. Surely you're not suggesting we made a mistake in letting them leave? I'm suggesting that we might have underestimated their contributions to our infrastructure. The problems in the shipping lanes are getting worse, not better. Admiral Trenver clicked his mandibles dismissively. Technical difficulties are normal. During any transition, give our engineers time to adapt. But Cloakter was no longer convinced. He had started to notice patterns in the failures. Systems that had run flawlessly for years were breaking down in ways that suggested they had been more complex than anyone realized. The humans hadn't just been maintaining alien technology, they had been improving it in ways that the aliens were only now beginning to understand. As the delegates continued their celebration, Cloakter quietly made a decision. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Great Council Station shuddered as another power surge ran through its systems. Emergency lights flickered in the corridors, and the environmental controls struggled to maintain proper atmosphere. What had once been the most advanced facility in the galaxy was now plagued by constant technical failures. Trade Minister Cloakter stood in the Emergency Operations Center, watching as teams of alien engineers worked frantically to repair the latest breakdown. The quantum communication network had failed again, cutting off contact with 12 star systems. This was the third major failure this month, and each one lasted longer than the previous. Status report, Cloakter demanded, his metallic voice. Echoing off the walls, Chief Engineer Takmer, a six-armed creature from the Technical Guild, looked up from his diagnostic equipment. The primary communication array is experiencing cascade failures in the quantum entanglement matrix. We've managed to restore partial function, but the system is operating at only 20% capacity. Cloakter's internal processors whirred as he calculated the implications. How long for full repairs? Unknown, Minister. The human technical manuals don't cover this type of failure. We're working from first principles, but the system design is more complex than we initially understood. What Takmer didn't want to admit was that the human manuals seemed deliberately incomplete. They covered basic operations and simple repairs, but nothing about the sophisticated improvements that were clearly integrated throughout the system. It was as if the humans had left behind instruction guides for operating a starship while hiding all the details about how the engines actually worked. Meanwhile, Engineer Rick Johnson sat in humanity's secret monitoring base in the Outer Rim, watching the Council's struggles with a mixture of satisfaction and professional interest. The base was hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, its advanced stealth systems making it invisible to Council sensors. The communication network is down to 15% efficiency, Rick reported to his colleagues on Earth through a secure quantum channel. They're trying to bypass the quantum entanglement stabilizers, but they don't understand how the phase variance compensators work. Dr. Lisa Chen's voice came through the communication system from Earth's primary research facility. Any sign they're making progress on understanding our modifications? None. They keep treating the symptoms instead of addressing the underlying problems. Yesterday, I watched a team spend 18 hours replacing a perfectly good power relay because they couldn't figure out why it was drawing more energy than their specifications indicated. Rick pulled up another screen showing the status of mining operations throughout the former human sectors. The automated mining platforms are down to 40% of normal output. 3 facilities have gone completely offline after their central computers crashed. The truth was that humans had spent decades quietly upgrading every system they encountered. When alien engineers designed a mining platform to extract ore at a certain rate, human technicians would modify the equipment to work twice as efficiently. When communication networks were built to handle a specific data load, humans would enhance them to carry 10 times more information, but they had done it so cleverly that the aliens never noticed. The improvements were integrated seamlessly with existing systems, and the documentation was kept deliberately vague. To the Council members, it looked like their technology was simply working better than expected. They never realized that human ingenuity was responsible for the enhanced performance. Now, without human maintenance, those improvements were failing one by one. Systems were reverting to their original, less efficient designs, or breaking down entirely when alien engineers tried to repair them incorrectly on the Council station. Ambassador Meldick of the Outer Colonies was having his own crisis. His home system had been cut off from the Galactic Communication Network for 3 days, and the trade routes that supplied his colonies with essential goods were experiencing severe delays. The situation is becoming desperate, Meldick told the emergency session of the Council leadership. My people are running short of medical supplies, and our food shipments are weeks behind schedule. Council Speaker Zeth Carr shifted uncomfortably on his floating throne. His purple skin had lost some of its usual luster, and his 6 eyes showed signs of stress. Our engineers are working around the clock to resolve these issues. The technical difficulties are temporary. Temporary? Meldick's voice rose in frustration. These problems have been getting worse for months. Perhaps it's time to admit that we may have underestimated the humans' contribution to our infrastructure. Chancellor Vexthal's crystalline body flashed with angry light. The humans were maintenance technicians, nothing more. Surely the greatest. Civilizations in the galaxy can manage without primitive repair crews, but Admiral Trenver was no longer so confident. His own fleet was experiencing unprecedented mechanical failures. Ships that should have been capable of crossing the galaxy were breaking down in their home systems. Just yesterday, his flagship had been stranded for 6 hours. When its hyperdrive system developed a fault that none of his engineers could diagnose, the human sectors are becoming increasingly dangerous for travel, Admiral Trenver admitted. Navigation beacons are providing incorrect data, and several ships have reported near collisions with asteroid fields that don't appear on our charts. What the Admiral didn't know was that Captain Amy Foster was orchestrating many of these accidents from her stealth ship. The human monitoring stations had been observing Council ship movements for months, and they had developed sophisticated ways to cause problems without leaving evidence. Silent running to base, Amy reported through her secure channel. The Vorthan cruiser Mighty Conquest is currently drifting in the Kepler belt after their navigation computer guided them into a dead zone. Should I render assistance? Negative, came the reply from Commander Bill Ryan. Let them figure it out on their own. But make sure they don't discover any of our monitoring equipment. Amy smiled as she watched the massive alien warship struggle with what should have been a simple navigation problem. The ship's crew was following their standard procedures perfectly, but those procedures assumed that the navigation beacons were providing accurate information. The humans had long ago installed backup systems and error-checking protocols that prevented such problems. Without those safeguards, the Council's ships were essentially flying blind. Back on Earth, Dr. Pete Jackson was analyzing reports from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The scope of the infrastructure collapse was even worse than they had predicted. The quantum communication network is operating at less than 20% capacity, he reported to the Emergency Planning Committee. The automated trading systems have crashed completely in 4 sectors, and the diplomatic translation protocols are producing some truly bizarre results. Dr. Karen White looked up from her own analysis. Any indication that they're trying to contact us for assistance? Not officially. But we're intercepting increased chatter about the need to locate human technical specialists. Some of the smaller species are suggesting that the Council should swallow its pride and ask for help. The irony was not lost on the human observers. For decades, the Council had treated humanity as a useful but unimportant member species. They had assigned humans to mundane technical jobs while reserving the important political and military positions for themselves. The aliens had assumed that anyone could do maintenance work, never realizing that the humans were actually redesigning and improving everything they touched. Now, the galaxy's greatest civilizations were discovering that they couldn't even maintain their own technology without help from the species they had dismissed as primitive. On the mining platform Kepler-7, the situation was becoming critical. The facility that had once been one of the most productive in the galaxy was now operating at a fraction of its capacity. The automated systems that sorted and processed ore were constantly malfunctioning, and the power grid was so unstable that sections of the platform had to be shut down on a rotating basis. Supervisor Kralven, a veteran engineer from the Technical Guild, stared at the diagnostic screens in growing despair. The humans left instruction manuals for everything, he muttered to his assistant. But these manuals assume knowledge that we apparently don't possess. His assistant, a young crystalline named Veltar, looked up from her datapad. Perhaps the humans were more skilled than we gave them credit for. Kralven had been thinking the same thing. The human foreman who had run this facility, Bill Ryan, had always seemed competent but unremarkable. He followed orders, completed his assignments on time, and never caused problems. But now, with Bill gone, Kralven was realizing that the human had been doing far more than simple maintenance work. Contact the Council station, Kralven ordered. Request permission to attempt communication with human colonies. We need technical assistance. But when Veltar tried to establish contact with the nearest human settlement, she encountered the same problem that other council facilities had been reporting. The human colonies weren't responding to any communication attempts. It was as if an entire species had simply vanished from the galaxy. 2 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council faced its worst crisis in recorded history. The emergency session was being held in the backup conference room, because the main chamber's life support system had failed again. Half the delegates wore portable breathing apparatus, while others sat in environmental suits that hissed and wheezed with every movement. Council. Speaker Zethkar looked around the room with his 6 eyes, taking in the sight of the galaxy's most powerful leaders reduced to this desperate state. His purple skin had grown pale, and deep lines of stress marked his once proud features. The floating throne that had once symbolized his authority now wobbled uncertainly, its anti-gravity systems struggling to maintain stability. "The situation reports," Zethkar announced, his voice lacking its former commanding tone. Trade Minister Cloakter stood up slowly, his metallic body showing signs of wear that would have been unthinkable years ago. 7 sectors are now completely cut off from the galactic communication network. The automated trading systems have collapsed in 12 more regions. Food shortages are being reported on 18 worlds, and medical supply deliveries have stopped entirely in the Outer Rim. The numbers were staggering, but they only told part of the story. Ambassador Meldick added his own grim report. "My home colony of New Sigma has been without power for 3 days. The fusion reactors keep shutting down for reasons our engineers cannot understand. We've had to evacuate half the population to emergency shelters." Chancellor Vexthal's crystalline body had lost its usual sparkle, appearing dull and cracked. "The Crystalline Dominion's manufacturing centers are operating at 15% capacity. Our quantum forges keep producing defective materials, and we cannot determine why." Admiral Trengor clicked his mandibles nervously. "The fleet is in worse condition than our manufacturing. Yesterday, the battleship Eternal Glory suffered a complete engine failure during a routine patrol. The crew spent 14 hours drifting in space before a rescue vessel could reach them. But the most shocking revelation came from Chief Engineer Tokmer, who had been leading the Council's efforts to repair their failing systems. "We have made a disturbing discovery," he announced, his 6 arms trembling slightly. "The humans did not simply maintain our technology. They fundamentally altered it in ways we are only now beginning to understand." Zethkar leaned forward on his unstable throne. "Explain." "Every system they touched was improved beyond its original specifications. Communication networks that were designed to handle a certain data load were modified to carry 10 times more information. Power systems that should have produced a specific output were enhanced to generate twice the energy. Mining equipment that was built to extract or at a particular rate was upgraded to work 3 times faster." The room fell silent except for the hissing of environmental suits and the occasional wheeze from failing life support systems. Tokmer continued, his voice growing more troubled. "But they did it so subtly that we never noticed. The improvements were integrated seamlessly with our existing technology. To us, it appeared that our systems were simply working better than expected." "And now?" Zethkar asked, though he already knew the answer. "Now those improvements are failing. Our systems are reverting to their original, less efficient designs. In some cases, they are breaking down entirely because our engineers don't understand the modifications well enough to maintain them properly." General Paul Martinez watched this entire exchange from humanity's primary monitoring station, hidden in a massive asteroid field beyond the galactic rim. The facility was a marvel of human engineering, completely invisible to Council sensors and equipped with the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. "They're finally starting to understand," Paul reported to his colleagues through the quantum communication network that connected all human settlements. "It only took them 2 years to figure out that we weren't just fixing their machines." "Doctor." Nancy Clark's voice came through from the new Earth colony. "Any sign that they're making progress on repairs?" "None. They keep making the same mistakes over and over." Yesterday, I watched a team of Vorthan engineers spend 12 hours trying to restart a fusion reactor. They eventually gave up and installed a replacement that produces half the power of the original. The truth was that humans had been quietly revolutionizing galactic technology for over a century. Every time they were assigned to maintain an alien system, they didn't just keep it running, they made it better. They improved efficiency, reduced maintenance requirements, enhanced safety features, and added capabilities that the original designers never imagined, but they had been careful never to take credit for these improvements. When a mining platform suddenly started producing more ore, the council assumed it was due to better raw materials. When communication systems began carrying more data, they attributed it to improved atmospheric conditions. When power plants started generating more energy, they credited it to superior fuel quality. The humans had allowed the aliens to believe that their technology was simply working at peak efficiency, never revealing that human ingenuity was responsible for the enhanced performance. Back in the council chamber, the debate was growing more heated. Some delegates were calling for immediate action to locate the humans, while others insisted that the galaxy's greatest civilizations should be able to solve their own problems. "We must swallow our pride and ask for their help," declared Ambassador Meldick. "Our people are suffering while we debate matters of honor and dignity." Chancellor Vexthal's crystalline body flashed with angry light. "The humans abandoned us in our time of need. Why should we beg them to return?" "Because our alternative is the collapse of galactic civilization," Meldick shot back. "Look around you. We're meeting in a backup room because our own council chamber doesn't have working life support. Our greatest warships are stranded by engine failures. Our most advanced manufacturing centers can't produce basic materials." Trade Minister Cloakter had been quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke up. "I've been conducting a comprehensive analysis of our technical failures. The pattern is clear. Every system that was under human management is now operating below acceptable levels. Every facility that employed human technicians is experiencing chronic problems." He paused and looked around the room. The humans weren't just maintenance workers. They were the hidden foundation that kept our entire civilization running. Admiral Trenvert clicked his mandibles in reluctant agreement. "My fleet engineers have reached the same conclusion. The humans modified our ships so extensively that we can't even operate them properly without their expertise." The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had been completely dependent on a species they had dismissed as primitive maintenance crews. "Then we contact them immediately," Thethkar declared. "Open communication channels to every known human colony. Offer them whatever terms they require to return and help us repair the damage." But Chief Engineer Takmer shook his head sadly. "We've been trying to contact the humans for 6 months. They're not responding to any of our messages." "Then send ships to their colonies," Thethkar ordered. "This is too important for communications delays." "We did," Takmer replied. 3 weeks ago, I dispatched a diplomatic mission to the Sol system, where Earth is located. The ships returned yesterday with disturbing news." The room fell completely silent. Even the hissing of environmental suits seemed quiet as everyone waited for Takmer's next words. "The Sol system is empty. No planets, no stations, no ships, no debris. Nothing but a normal star surrounded by empty space. It's as if Earth and all the human colonies simply vanished." The implications of this revelation struck the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Several of them began talking at once, their voices rising in panic and disbelief. "Impossible," Thethkar declared. "Entire star systems don't just disappear." "The sensor readings are conclusive," Takmer insisted. "We scanned every planet in the system multiple times. There's no trace of human civilization anywhere. No energy signatures, no artificial structures, no indication that anyone ever lived there." Captain Tony Roberts observed this entire scene from his advanced reconnaissance ship, positioned just outside the Council Station's sensor range. The New Horizon was equipped with stealth technology that made it completely invisible to alien detection systems. They still don't understand, Tony reported to his base. They think we just vanished mysteriously. They have no idea that we've been building our own civilization beyond their known space for the past 50 years. The truth was that humanity's withdrawal had been planned in extraordinary detail. While the Council saw them as useful technicians, humans had been secretly developing technologies that would allow them to thrive independently. They had built hidden colonies in dark space between galaxies, developed faster-than-light travel systems that left no detectable traces, and created stealth technologies that could hide entire planets from alien sensors. When they left the galactic community, they had taken everything with them. Every human settlement, every ship, every piece of equipment had been relocated to their new home beyond the galactic rim. 3 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council was dead. The great station that had once housed the galaxy's most powerful leaders now drifted silently through space, its lights dim and its corridors empty. The life support systems had finally failed completely, and the few remaining inhabitants had evacuated to their homeworlds weeks ago. Council Speaker Zethkar sat alone in his private quarters aboard a small rescue vessel, watching through the window as the massive station slowly rotated in the darkness. His 6 eyes were clouded with exhaustion, and his once purple skin had faded to a sickly gray. The floating throne that had symbolized his authority was now just another piece of broken furniture in the abandoned chamber. How did it come to this? He whispered to himself, though he already knew the answer. The collapse had accelerated rapidly over the past year. Entire star systems had gone dark as their power grids failed. Trade routes that had connected civilizations for thousands of years were now too dangerous to travel. The great manufacturing centers that had supplied the galaxy with everything from starships to medical equipment had shut down permanently. Some species had adapted better than others. The peaceful traders who had always maintained their own simple technology were managing to survive in isolation. A few smaller civilizations had banded together to share resources and knowledge. But the great powers that had once ruled the galaxy were shadows of their former selves. The Vorthan Empire, which had controlled dozens of star systems, now struggled to maintain basic services on 3 worlds. The Crystalline Dominion's quantum forges had produced nothing but defective materials for 2 years, forcing them to abandon their advanced manufacturing and return to primitive methods. The Hegemony fleet, once the terror of the galaxy, was reduced to a handful of barely functional ships. Captain Tony Roberts watched the scene from his position aboard the New Horizon, observing the ruins of galactic civilization with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. The advanced human vessel remained invisible to alien sensors, allowing him to witness the final collapse without being detected. "Status report," Tony said into his communication device. Dr. Helen Brooks's voice came through the quantum channel from humanity's new capital world of New Terra. The last major council facility went offline 6 hours ago. The Vorthan Central Command has lost contact with their remaining colonies. For all practical purposes, the galactic government has ceased to exist. Tony nodded grimly. It was exactly what the human leadership had predicted would happen. Any change in our policy regarding contact? None. The Council made their choice when they dismissed us as primitive maintenance crews. We offered partnership, and they demanded subservience. We offered innovation, and they insisted on conformity. They have to live with the consequences of their decisions. The truth was that humanity could have saved the galactic civilization at any point during the past 3 years. Their new technology was advanced enough to repair all the failing systems within months. Their understanding of the modifications they had made could have restored the galaxy's infrastructure to full efficiency, but the human leadership had made a collective decision not to intervene. They had spent too many decades being treated as second-class citizens, having their contributions ignored and their potential dismissed. The aliens had made it clear that they saw humans as useful servants, nothing more. Now they would have to learn to survive without the servants they had taken for granted. In the ruins of the council chamber, a single message played on repeat from a damaged communication terminal. It was the final transmission that Ambassador Jake Morrison had recorded before leaving the station 3 years ago. To the members of the Galactic Council, we leave you with this final message. Humanity offered you partnership, but you demanded subservience. We offered innovation, but you insisted on conformity. We offered solutions, but you offered only criticism and condescension. The message continued as emergency power flickered through the abandoned chamber. You saw us as primitive maintenance workers, never realizing that we were the foundation holding your civilization together. You dismissed our contributions while depending on our expertise. You mocked our methods while benefiting from our improvements. Pause, and then Jake's voice grew more solemn. We have found our own path among the stars, and it leads far from your failing empire. We will not return to save you from the consequences of your arrogance. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us, but only if we treat each other with dignity and respect. The message ended with a final warning. Perhaps the next species you encounter will teach you the value of humility. We hope they are more patient with your prejudices than we could be. Meanwhile, in the space between galaxies, humanity's new civilization was thriving beyond anything they had achieved under the Council's rule. The hidden colonies that had taken 50 years to build in secret were now expanding rapidly, free from the restrictions and bureaucracy that had limited their growth in Council space. Dr. Helen Brooks stood on the observation deck of New Terra's central spire, looking out at a vista that would have amazed the aliens who had dismissed humanity as primitive. Floating cities drifted through the planet's atmosphere, connected by streams of light that carried people and goods at incredible speeds. Massive space elevators reached up to orbital stations where the most advanced research in the galaxy was taking place. The latest reports from our exploration fleets? Her assistant Dr. Marcus Turner said, handing her a datapad. Helen reviewed the information with satisfaction. We've discovered 17 habitable worlds in the past month alone. The new terraforming technology is working even better than projected. And the other species? Marcus asked. Any contact with survivors from Council space? Helen considered this carefully. We've received several distress signals from refugee ships, small groups, that managed to escape the collapse. Our policy remains the same. We offer humanitarian assistance, but no technology transfers and no permanent settlement in our space. The human leadership had learned from their experience with the Council. They would be generous with food, medical supplies, and safe passage for refugees, but they would not make the mistake of sharing their advanced technology with species that might one day use it against them or dismiss their contributions. What about the peaceful traders? Marcus asked. Their ambassador has been requesting a formal meeting for months. The peaceful traders were always different, Helen admitted. They treated us with respect even when the Council did not. I'm willing to consider limited trade agreements with them, but only if they agree to our terms. Those terms were strict. Any species that wanted to establish relations with humanity would have to acknowledge humans as equals from the beginning. There would be no gradual acceptance, no probationary periods, no testing of human worthiness. Either they treated humanity with full respect, or there would be no relationship at all. Back in the ruins of Council space, the few surviving leaders were beginning to understand the magnitude of their error. Ambassador Meldick, now effectively the leader of what remained of the galactic government, had spent months trying to piece together exactly what had happened. The humans weren't just fixing our machines, he explained to a small gathering of representatives from the surviving civilizations. They were redesigning our entire technological foundation. Every system they touched became more efficient, more reliable, more capable than we had ever imagined possible. He gestured to a holographic display showing the extent of the infrastructure collapse. Without their constant improvements and maintenance, our technology reverted to its original inferior state. In many cases, it broke down entirely because we couldn't understand the modifications they had made. Trade Minister Cloakter, one of the few council members who had survived the collapse, shook his metallic head in disbelief. We had the most innovative species in the galaxy working for us, and we treated them like servants. We could have learned from them, partnered with them, built something greater together. Instead, we drove them away with our arrogance, Meldick said quietly. And now we're paying the price for our blindness. The survivors had tried everything to locate humanity and ask for help. They had sent ships to every corner of known space, broadcasting messages of apology and offers of equal partnership. But humanity remained silent and invisible, hidden in their new home beyond the reach of alien technology. Some refugee groups had reported seeing strange ships at the edge of their sensor range, vessels that appeared briefly to offer aid before vanishing again. These Good Samaritan encounters gave hope to some that humanity still cared about the suffering in council space, but they offered no prospect of renewed contact. Captain Tony Roberts had been involved in several of these mercy missions, delivering medical supplies and food to desperate colonies before disappearing back into dark space. It was deeply satisfying to help people in need, but the human leadership had been clear about the limits of their involvement. "We save lives," Helen Brooks had explained to the Mercy mission commanders. "But we don't save civilizations. That's something they have to do for themselves."